Time to fuel your business success. Welcome to Harmonious at Lunch. We're bringing you bite-sized advice and expert conversations to drive clarity and growth 5 days a week. Make sure you join our Facebook group at humanopt.com/lunch, where listeners like you and our guests hang out so we can find harmony in business together. If you're building a business, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Welcome back into some more bite-sized business advice. Today's episode, we're talking AI, we're talking SEO, and the merge between them. I don't know, marriage, merge. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens on this episode, but I have a very special guest. We're going to talk about how to make sure you continue your SEO best practices to get found on AI as the world evolves. We talk about AI a lot on this show. Steven Schneider, you are an expert. You're going to help us. Welcome to the show, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Excited to be here, Brandon.
I'm excited for this conversation. I told you before we started recording, I had a guest recording this morning, so different episode, very similar topic. And I think it's just something that we need to be aware of. That was a couple weeks ago at this point when you're hearing this episode, but let's pick up on the patterns here for those of you listening that this might just be important. So Steven, let's dive in. SEO is changing, but SEO is what you do for your clients. What are you seeing in the marketplace? What's sort of the disruption going on right now?
A lot of fear and uncertainty. I think that kind of sums it up, but I think there's also a lot of excitement. I think we're in this stage where if you kind of cue back into early 2000s, 2001, 1999 era, people were starting to hear about this interesting thing called Google, and they didn't really know what it was going to offer or what it was going to bring to business and to, their entire life, essentially. And I think that we're starting to enter that same kind of wave of a second gen version of that with AI. And excitingly enough, I think that businesses have a lot of upside in order to drive more business, drive more leads, drive more clients to their business via AI. And I think that anybody who can embrace the change and embrace the evolution is going to see a lot of upside.
Okay, so I'm glad you brought that up. It sparked something in my tiny little brain that I'm curious to discuss. And I don't know if you've done research on this, but I think at least now AI and the new form of search that we're sort of moving into with AI mode on Google and just using ChatGPT and Perplexity to search, I think it's an opportunity for businesses, especially small and medium businesses, if we can capitalize on it. But I'm curious to look back before we look forward. With Google at the turn of the century, I mean, did it level the playing field for companies? What was the real opportunity then that we can kind of extrapolate and bring forward to now?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think if we just kind of go back to 2000 at the turn of the century, like you said, and then we go back 20 years before that, in the 80s, the 70s, and, even further back, they were calling people, they were putting ads in newspapers, and the marketing as a game was evolving. And so when the internet comes along and people can instantly be connected within seconds and see that, oh, my competitor is ranking on the first page of Google. How do we get those juicy top rankings that everyone seeks out? Nowadays, it's just how do we show up in ChatGPT? How do we show up in Perplexity and Bard and generative AI search? And so I don't think that it's any different to where we were 25, 30 years ago. I think the difference being that there's a new tool, there's a new platform, there's a new medium for SEOs and business owners and CMOs and founders to leverage. And just like then, if you don't play the game correctly and you kind of avoid it and think it's a fad, like you're going to be left in the dust. And those who actually do double down on it are going to, really grow their businesses through it.
Let's be real. Nobody was connecting in seconds in 2000. That's just.
I was waiting for you to say that. I know. As I was saying that, I was like, actually, it's probably minutes and dial up and brutal, but you get my drift.
I am old enough to remember the dial up tone.
Yep.
Although just barely, I'll say that. But anyway, so looking ahead now and understanding that, because you're right. I mean, it was newspapers and phone calls before that. It's happened time and time again. It's just another cycle. It's another tool. I don't want to get caught up in the fear cycle of things, but looking at the opportunity of what's there, personally, I know from the companies that we deal with and we talk to, a lot of bigger companies are scared of AI because they haven't fully wrapped their legal departments around it yet. And I think they're going to miss the boat to some degree, which is where the small and medium-sized businesses can really come in and capitalize on the opportunity. So making sure that your company is found in search, whether it's AI search or ChatGPT, I'm sure there's some things that the listeners can be doing now to make sure that they're ahead of the curve and they win, so to speak, when the time comes and the wave collapses. What are those things? Where should we start with understanding where we are?
The big things that we're really doing nowadays to ensure that our clients are ranking in ChatGPT and other AI platforms is really focusing on quality content and authority. And so anybody who's not in the SEO space, authority is kind of it's a broad term. How do you define authority? What builds authority? All that sort of stuff. And I always like to kind of picture an iceberg. And so we always know that you can see this little tip of the iceberg and all that stuff above the water, which would be like your home page, your about page, contact page, the essentials, I guess. But just like the Titanic and how we know that ended, most of the depth is below the water. And that's what ultimately adds depth and authority to your website is all of the content, blogs, service pages, that in-depth content that tells Google and your visitors that you are an expert and that you have the expertise to speak on whatever you're selling with some sort of authority. And so when it comes to ranking in AI, if you don't have the content to begin with, the AI model won't know that you even have expertise in that field. You don't have the questions or the answers for it to pull in. And so I think people who have those really bare bone websites they're really gonna feel the burn when they aren't showing up in AI. It's because, yeah, that makes sense. Like you don't have the necessary content to meet the requirements to show up in what the questions are being asked on.
So here's the question, because I think we all understand the importance of blogs and SEO and ranking, getting found, all that stuff. Are we good at it? Are we doing it? Different conversation. But we understand it's important. You have to be doing it, right? Now we have AI, we have generative AI, where I can go write 50,000 blog posts tomorrow and not spend any time doing it. Technically speaking, I'm putting out content. Is the AI getting more refined on what it's accepting as authoritative content, or is the spray and pray approach actually a viable approach to getting found on the internet?
I highly against doing spray and pray AI content. It'll actually cost you more time and money long term than you think you're getting at the start of that entire conversation.
Glad you said that. Thank you.
So we at a Trio SEO are 100% human written and human edited agency. And, we've been in this game for a long time. We've built businesses of our own to 6, 7, 8 figures, exited our own companies. And all of it was via SEO. We play by the book. We're boring. We do it exactly as it should be done. But if you start introducing these tools that aim to cut corners and cheat the system, that's the key word right there. You are trying to cheat the system. And so you think that Google doesn't have enough smart people on their team to understand quality content versus spammy AI written content. And granted, I think that AI content can be good if you give it enough rules and enough guidelines. But if you're creating 500 blog posts a month, I have to assume that it's very poorly done. And so there is a trending, downward line when it comes to where quality and quantity start to overlap and how those two can change. So be very cautious as you start to experiment with these tools that promise the world for the lowest cost. And really, you might be saving money on your P&L, but at the same time, you're not really helping yourself long term. So what's the point?
Yeah, it really doesn't make sense. But I mean, you see people do it all the time, whether it's a blog post or putting stuff on social media, on LinkedIn. You can really tell.
Social is great. Hey, blast AI all over social if your heart feels for it. But SEO is a whole different game.
Yeah, but even then, like I've seen people get called out for putting up AI generated content that's not their own, and it impacts your reputation. So I guess it's just, be careful with it. If you're going to use it, use your brain cells if you have any.
I think the beauty of it is that if your content can be seen as AI or discovered or found out as AI content, you're not creating AI content well enough. The goal of creating
Right.
quality AI content is that it doesn't look like AI content when it's done, but you just saved yourself 70 hours of work. So like
Mhm.
I know people on LinkedIn, you would never even know that their content is AI written, and they write 30, 40, 50 blog posts in one day. And that's how I think AI should be treated, where it's quality. It actually answers questions that your ideal clients and core group care about. And it doesn't feel like it's this inauthentic way to just check the box and move on in life.
Yeah, I got called out on LinkedIn once for using AI to generate content strictly because I used emojis in the post.
Oh,
Turns out I just have an emoji problem. That was actually me generated content, so I
oh
was
no.
a little disappointed, but it is what it is.
Yeah, there's always going to be those what we think is AI, like emojis, M dashes, you name it. The checklist is growing by the day.
Yeah. Sorry, I like emojis. Please forgive me. But anyway, moving on. Okay, but let's talk about AI SEO because this podcasts are great for SEO. Something I
Yep.
learned by chance a couple of years ago. If I were to take this episode, or if you were to take this episode, take the transcript and create a blog post about it using AI, is that a good use of the technology? Because it's your words, your and my words. It's you had the conversation, you did the work, you're just not writing the blog post. Is that fair to use, or are we still crossing the line?
At the end of the day, it just depends on what's your goal. So if the goal of the content is to just live on your site and be an internal guide or an internal resource for anybody who visits the site via other external vehicles, call it organic search, ads, etc., then sure, do whatever you want. If you're using AI to create the transcript in hopes that it will rank organically, it won't, because SEO is so keyword driven and intent focused that if you create content first and figure out how to SEO it later, the path is inherently wrong. So you always want to start with what keyword are you trying to rank for? What is the intent behind that keyword? And how do you create content that matches the search intent and what people are actually expecting to find when they type those keywords in? But just creating a transcript and publishing it on the site, like Google, like what's the point? Like you don't even know what you're trying to match the search intent for to begin with.
So basically, we should just delete this podcast and pretend it never happened.
Everything but my episode.
Okay, delete all 388 previous episodes. Steven's the lucky winner.
No, I think I mean, it just really depends on trying to figure out, like, are you trying to rank these podcasts individually, organically? And if so, like, go into it with a strategy. Like, what is a article you could write around, say, like, take mine, for example. Like, is there an episode or a topic in mind that comes around, like, what you should be like 10 things to learn about like SEO and AI. Like SEO and AI is probably like a huge topic, et cetera. But you kind of get how it's like the podcast should be a value add within that piece of content, not the opposite where you're trying to rank the podcast by itself. Is that
Interesting?
It's more of the podcast is an asset to the overall search intent. Anybody who finds that topic should find the podcast as a secondary piece of that overarching guide itself.
Okay. So is that a strategy then to maybe figure out what you want to rank for, and then if you have done podcasts or been a guest on podcasts, to strategically insert them within that post?
100%. Like we have a client that they had a fully fledged YouTube channel, like was crushing, and they were posting all the transcripts from YouTube on their blog, and they had no idea what they were doing. Kind of similar, they just like post the transcript, move on. And just because they had the YouTube stuff figured out, the blog was actually ranking accidentally because they knew the keyword research from the YouTube stuff. So the point being is that it always starts with somebody's looking for something. How do I create something that answers that thing? Unless you just have a brand and people love you, whole different story. But yeah, I mean, if you can do the keyword research from the ground up, figure out the strategy, and then just create content around that or pull in a guest speaker to touch on that topic, absolutely, I think that would crush.
That's why people like you exist. I have zero patience to do all of that. So
It's
rest assured.
one of the weirdest things that I have found that I nerd out on over my entire years of existence.
To each his own, right? And that's totally fine. But it's important too. And like I said, I mean, it's good to know this stuff, and that's why I asked the questions, because I would never go do that. I mean, I don't do any SEO for this podcast. It's a miracle anyone has found it and listened to it. But for those of you watching and listening, we love you, and I'm glad you found the podcast. And we have a lot of you listening, which is super cool. But it's these other ways to grow your business. I'm not using this to grow my business. I'm using this to put out cool content and meet awesome people like yourself. For the people who want to grow their business, building the rest of that iceberg is probably confusing, because I would assume a lot of people just throw stuff in there, not really having a strategy, and you're building like 15 icebergs instead of one. Is that a good analogy?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that the other kind of downside there is that people will create content for their blog because they think they know their customer and this is exactly what they want to read. And we're going to go create this blog. And then they do it and none of them gain traction. And then they think SEO is a dud. And they feel like they have been burned by SEO because they've spent 6 months creating blog content and none of it landed. And it's like, well, of course it didn't work. Like, you didn't create a strategy from the ground up that was written and proven by somebody who's done this a million times. And so if you can go into it with a roadmap and say, okay, we're going to create these topics because they make sense to our customer, and here's the funnel segments to which the customer is actually in. Like, if you create all top of funnel content, like, that's not going to drive revenue. So let's focus on bottom of the funnel content. So like, there is a lot of nuts and bolts that go into why are we creating these pieces of content, and what is the structure that whoever is searching for that is intending to actually look at and try to work through when they arrive at that content. It's like a whole series of psychoanalysis, I guess, at the end of the day. And that's kind of why it's super interesting to me, is because people are literally typing these things in Google, and here's how you create content that matches exactly what they're expecting to find before they even know they're going to type it.
Differentiate that for me real quick, because I haven't heard it in the context of SEO. Top of funnel versus bottom of funnel content. What's the difference?
So like I'll use like Trio SEO. Like, we have our own blog, we do all that sort of stuff. So like, if somebody is searching for what is SEO, like, they're not going to buy SEO. Like, they're so far removed from purchasing SEO. There could also be different customer groups around like how to learn SEO. Again, they're not buying SEO, but somebody who's in the B2B space, like people that we service, if they're looking for B2B SEO services, that is a piece of content that is very bottom of the funnel focused, like very high intent for somebody who is searching that to pull out their credit card. And so over time, there are going to be pieces of content that have different funnel segments attached to them, whether it's service related keywords, whether it's versus keywords, maybe it's product A, product B, brand A versus brand B, cost keywords, like how much does XYZ cost, etc. So like, people who are kind of searching for those specific phrases are somewhere in a thought journey of their own. And so wherever that leads them is kind of where we should create content that matches their next step.
Got it. That's interesting. I like separating it that way, because you really have to know your customer when they buy. This is such a bigger conversation than SEO.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of like where I fell in love with this, because you are in a way almost creating a playbook before somebody even knows that they're going to need it. So it's like a retirement account. You're creating all this content. It's compounding on your site. You have this incredibly valuable asset. And over time, it starts to rank in Google, and the snowball starts to roll, and the snowball gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And you blink and you kind of look back at the end of a year, 2 year, 3 year long journey, and you have this powerhouse of a site that just funnels people into their site and purchase. And it's just happening 24/7, 365 while you sleep, all hours of the night. It's very powerful stuff. It's how I look at it.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. So before I let you go, last question here. Google is so 2020. Can we use AI to help us with this process? Can we go in and prompt it and say, instead of looking up search terms and trending keywords and stuff like that, can Gemini, ChatGPT, Perplexity, whatever, insert your AI of choice, help us refine the top of funnel versus bottom of funnel keywords that we can then build our strategy around?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's not quite there as a perfect model, but I think if you're trying to create a strategy that's actionable and usable for yourself, I would just put yourself in your customer's point of view and say, if I was searching for this, literally Google the keyword or throw it in ChatGPT and see what the results are, and then work backwards from there. I think that it's very easy to be so business focused that we forget to actually think like our customers and our clients and go through the process as if they are. What are they going to find? How are they receiving that content? How would you change it up from your competitors that are ranking for this stuff? And how can you make it better? Same thing with the podcast. Mix in a podcast, mix in a YouTube video. Like, give them more value than they expect to receive, and you will win.
I love it. Quick shout out to a previous guest on this show about getting in your customer's shoes, Ray Lozano. I'm going to say it was 3-4 weeks ago. If you're listening to this episode, go listen to that episode too. He broke it down, a step-by-step formula of how to get in your customer's shoes, just like Steven's saying. Very, very valuable on how you can do that for your own business. So Steven, very cool that you mentioned that as well. We got to wrap this up, but the listeners are maybe panicking, maybe excited. I don't know. I think there's a ton of opportunity on the horizon. If they want to get ahead of this, if they want to understand SEO for their business, especially as we move into AI searching, how can they reach out to you and get in touch?
Yeah, I'm super active on LinkedIn. I post daily. You can go to our website. We're also offering free website audits. You can go to the link right there, trueseo.com/audit. If you're interested in working with us, we run a handwritten by myself, hand done by the team audit, looking at all different components to make sure that you can actually crush it when it comes to SEO. And if you're not ready, you still get the audit to make sure that, hey, this is how it works. So reach out to me. I'm always happy to talk, DM, network. Just love meeting people.
I love it. Hand done by humans. They still make humans? Is that a thing?
Every now and then we'll get a few extras.
This is crazy. You've blown my mind today, Steven. I love it. Thanks for stopping by.
Yep. Thanks, Brandon.
For those of you watching, listening, all that, social media and the audit, the link is down in the show notes or description, wherever you're watching. So go check that out. I encourage you to get ahead of this wave and capitalize on the change in the market. If you're too slow to changes in the market, you will get left behind. And this one, I think, is a pretty big one. So go check it out. Thanks again to Steven for being here. We'll see you on tomorrow's episode of Harmonious at Lunch.
Another episode of Harmonious at Lunch in the books. I hope this episode made you think and you grabbed some actionable ideas to propel your business. Don't forget to like, comment your takeaways, and subscribe wherever you're listening so we can help more entrepreneurs just like you achieve harmony in their life and business. For cutting-edge tools that bring clarity to your people and processes, check out humanoff.com to download our app today. See you next time.